Number 10. The Newlywed. Amber Bellows was 28 years old in 2014 when she died in a tragic and frightening base jumping accident. Amber was a rising star in the world of extreme sports, and there's nothing more extreme than jumping off a cliff wearing nothing but a backpack with a parachute in it. The disaster struck in Zion National Park. According to park officials, Amber arrived the morning of the accident with her husband, Clayton Butler. The duo had been married for only 2 weeks, and they were excited to go base jumping together at the top of Mount Kinnisava. But once they reached that summit, hidden in the southwest corner of Zion, things went terribly wrong. Amber jumped off the edge of the mountain, her parachute didn't deploy, and Clayton jumped off the mountain after her like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. He tried to grab his wife before she hit the ground, but there was nothing he could do. He couldn't match her velocity and eventually had to pull his parachute. Clayton watched helplessly while his wife plummeted 2,000 feet, 610 meters to the hard ground below. She died instantly. It was like she jumped out of an airplane and landed headfirst on the ground. Not even the best helmet could have helped. But that's one danger that comes with extreme sports. Amber knew what she was getting into, like everyone else who takes that kind of leap. And even though she's gone, she is not forgotten. She's remembered as a sweet, exciting, and adventurous good person. Her friends and family will keep her spirit alive. Number 9. Double tragedy. Mary Connell's friend captured her last moments alive on a GoPro in January 2016 before she parachuted off a bridge and died. Following the tragic accident, one of her close friends spoke to People magazine, calling Mary a genuine person who would sneak into your heart and never leave. The accident happened in Big Sur, California. Mary was a skilled base jumper, someone who had made plenty of jumps before. But this time, when she leaped from Bixby Bridge, she missed her landing target, got hit by a wave, and it washed her out to sea. But get ready for even more tragedy, because this story gets worse. In a desperate attempt to save Mary, her friend, a skydiving instructor from Finland named Rami Kajala, jumped into the ocean after her. He took off his helmet and parachute and dove in. But not only did he fail to save Mary, but the sea took him too, and he also drowned. Number 8. UTC High Rise. In March 2022, a man climbed to the top of a high-rise in San Diego and jumped off. His name was Eric Roden, an experienced base jumper from Cardiff by the Sea. According to the San Diego police, he climbed to the 23rd floor of the Palisade UTC luxury apartment at about 10:30 p.m. He had on a helmet and had a parachute strapped to his back. To make matters worse, he had brought his teenage daughter to watch him jump. Of course, he had planned to deploy his parachute and survive the jump. But that's not what happened. The parachute never opened, and he dropped like a stone to the ground below. The police were called after someone heard a loud pop, walked onto their balcony and saw Eric lying in a puddle of blood on the ground below them. First responders pronounced him dead on the scene, and his 16-year-old daughter was in shambles. Police Captain Scott Wall said it wasn't just one life lost, but another whose entire world has been devastated. His poor daughter now has to go through the rest of her life without a father, and with the traumatic memory of watching him splatter on the ground. Number 7. Death in the south of France. March of this year was an awful month for base jumpers. There was the man we just discussed who died in San Diego. Then another guy suffered a similar fate across the world in France. This other man, a 34-year-old guy from Britain, was on holiday with some friends in Millau when they jumped off the Bourguignon cliff and down into the Bourne Gorge. It was about 7 a.m. when they prepared to do the jump. The man's friends watched him leap off the cliff, but never saw his parachute open. They freaked out and called the police. Rescue teams came by helicopter to search the gorge for the missing base jumper. They found him hundreds of feet below, broken, unconscious, and in cardiac arrest. 2 rescuers cascaded down as close as they could to the injured man, but he had landed in a tough spot. His parachute opened, just not in time to save him. It got stuck on the edge of a cliffside, where they found him dangling from his torn chute. The rescuers got him onto a stretcher and airlifted him to a local hospital, but his injuries were too severe. He died at the Grenoble University Hospital later that day. Number 6. Survival in the Superstition Mountains. In the Superstition Mountains of Arizona, Johnny DeJulius got himself into a bit of a pickle. Surprise, surprise, this also happened in March of this year. It seems everybody and their dog went base jumping this year as soon as the weather got better, and almost none of them had a good time. Johnny climbed high in the Superstition Mountains with some friends, got himself positioned on a ledge, and jumped from a height of 500 feet, 152 meters. He had every intention of landing on solid ground. Instead, his parachute opened, and he got twisted up in it, then went crashing down painfully. Between his parachute opening and him hitting the side of a cliff, he had about 2 seconds to prepare himself. According to what he said after the incident, of which he miraculously survived, it was his biggest base jumping fear come true. Johnny had done similar stunts over 100 times. He considered himself a skilled and professional base jumper. This was the only time he had gotten into some serious trouble, left dangling from his broken parachute 40 feet, 12 meters from the bottom of a cliff. He just kept telling himself to stay awake and stay conscious. Thinking quickly, Johnny wedged himself between some jagged rocks so that he wouldn't crash to the ground. And then he clung to the cliff for dear life, while his friends climbed up from the bottom to get him. They guided his steps down until he reached solid ground. And then he was safe, shaking from the adrenaline, but somehow left without a single minor injury. He didn't even suffer any scrapes or bruises. Number 5. Base jumping traffic accident. Back in April 2018, a base jumper in New South Wales, Australia, caused a truck accident on a motorway. It was about 11 a.m. when emergency services were called to the scene of a brutal truck crash on the Hume motorway near Campbelltown. What the cops found out when they arrived was that a base jumper had thrown himself off the railing of the bridge as part of a stunt. His reckless actions caused a major traffic jam. The stunt distracted drivers, and a giant semi-truck crashed into the back of another truck, wrecking both vehicles. Nobody needed to go to the hospital, but the wreck totaled both trucks. Police never found the base jumper. He got away scot-free. Eyewitnesses saw him climb up the bridge, jump off, and saw his parachute open below. But by the time the cops got there, figured out everything that had happened, and sorted out the drivers of the truck, the base jumper had packed up his parachute and disappeared. Number 4. Ski base jumping. Renowned ski base jumper Shane McConkey perished in March 2009 after a stunt went wrong. If you're a bit confused by the ski base jumper, let me quickly explain. It's somebody who straps a parachute onto their back, goes skiing, and then slings themselves off a massive ramp. Then they deploy the parachute and glide gently to the ground, farther down the snowy mountain. It's a risky and extreme way to both ski and base jump. You might not remember Shane since this was over 10 years ago, but back in the early 2000s, he was a big name in extreme sports. For this stunt, he had traveled to the Dolomite Mountains in northern Italy to do some extreme filming. But while he was performing for the cameras, something went very wrong. Here's how the stunt started. Shane skied off the edge of the snowy cliff, performed a double backflip, and was supposed to fling his skis off his feet and then fly away in a wingsuit. It's a complicated stunt, but one he had executed perfectly many times before. The problem came when his skis failed to release. He tugged on the strap, but the skis didn't come off. He then went upside down and tried to release his bindings, but nothing was working. By the time his skis finally detached, he didn't have enough time to slow himself down with his parachute. He ended up hitting the ground hard, so hard it killed him. He left behind a wife, a young daughter, and thousands of admiring fans. Number 3. An expensive day at Zion. Marshall Miller describes himself as a professional athlete, and yet in 2020 he performed a very unprofessional base jump at Zion National Park. Not only was it unprofessional, but it was also illegal. His dangerous jump put protected falcons and condors in danger, and he paid the price for it. Most people have probably heard of Zion National Park, but even if you know about this exciting national wonder in Utah, you might not know it's home to endangered protected falcons and California condors. High in the park, in the rugged red cliffs, there are nests. One reason park rangers don't allow anyone up there, and especially not jumping off with a parachute, is because it can disturb the nesting area of these legendary birds, particularly the cliff face beneath Angel's Landing. It was from Angel's Landing that in 2019 the first hatched chick of a California condor took flight in Zion for the first time in over 100 years. The problem with base jumping is that it can disturb the parents, which can cause them to push their babies out of their nest. Or they simply abandon the nesting site altogether, and the babies die. And so when the Zion Rangers got word that a man was trying to base jump in the area, they immediately went up to track him down and stop him. And while the Rangers didn't find Marshall Miller during the day, they caught up to him at night. Rangers arrested Marshall and charged him with violating a climbing closure. Plus, they busted him for illegally jumping off a different mountain in January 2018. They banned him from the park and ordered him to pay a $5,000 fine. Number 2. Broken groomsman. In 2018, a groomsman took the saying "break a leg" a little too seriously when he broke his leg. It happened after he crashed into the side of a cliff during a base jump gone wrong. He suffered multiple fractures, not just to one leg, but to both. But just listen to this. The man was attending a skyline wedding. This is when people get married on a net strung between some cliffs, 350 feet, 107 meters above the ground. It was being held in Moab, Utah, and was actually really cool. This is one of those things that can happen when you have too many inexperienced people jumping from a flimsy net at 350 feet, 107 meters. The groomsmen launched themselves off the cliff just before the wedding vows were supposed to be said, and one of them got twisted up in the air. He then crashed into the side of the cliff, came tumbling down, and had to be evacuated. But even though the fall injured the groomsmen, the show must go on. Even with one man getting carted off to the hospital, the ludicrous skyline wedding continued. The flower girl jumped off the canyon and spread behind her a trail of floating petals. Number 1. The senior citizen daredevil. A senior citizen in Virginia has proved that you're never too old to be a daredevil. Police arrested the grandfather, 70 years old, for doing several insane base jumps off a bunch of buildings in Virginia. One of them was the Tyson's Corner building, 367 feet, 112 meters tall. The old man's name is Chuck Moser. Police originally suspected him of doing 6 base jumps off all the tallest buildings in the state back in 2018 and 2019. But by the time the police could build a case against him, the statute of limitations had already expired. But 2 years later, in 2021, the Fairfax County Police could finally arrest him on 3 counts of misdemeanor trespassing. This is because between 2020 and 2021, he went on a bunch more base jumps around Northern Virginia. One of them was from the Capital One campus. Even more hilarious is that Chuck has denied all the allegations against him. He said the charges are ridiculous. He added that the police have no proof he did anything, and yet there's a video of him jumping off the Tyson's Corner building. When asked about it, Chuck said it was somebody else in the video, and that since they can't confirm his face or his fingerprints, they need to drop the charges. We don't know what's going to happen to Chuck, but we know he's a former military man who had operated with the Army 101st Airborne Division, speculating in air assaults. It looks like even after his Army days, Chuck still loves jumping, even if he's 70 years old. Would you rather parachute from an airplane or base jump off the tallest building in the world? Which do you think would be scarier? Let me know in the comments, and thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to help support the channel, and I'll see you again soon for another shocking video.